Hello, everybody. It's Friday, December 31st. It's New Year's Eve, and I thought I'd hop on live and share with you some inside secrets that I've learned over the years with working with kids and families who are navigating life with ADHD. So, I just wanted to share with you a couple of those secrets to helping our kids with ADHD be their best selves. So, if you're here and you're watching, you have questions, feel free to comment at any time, and I'll be answering those questions. But I am going to pop and share some information here. Again, thank you for those of you who watched last night, my 50th episode, and listened to some senior detectives. It was amazing. And if you haven't yet seen that, the replay is already available. So make sure you say hello. Let me know you're here watching, and I will get started. So, as you know, I have been working and developing programs for kids and families who are navigating life with ADHD. And I wanted to, come in and share with you some lessons from the field, some secrets to be helping kids with ADHD be their best selves. Now, I'm going to go ahead and advance the screen here if I can do it. There we go. So, in this presentation, what we're going to talk about is ADHD and children, just a quick review, and then also review how ADHD affects family life, and then getting into the quick and secrets that I've uh, compiled for you on how to promote our children's best selves. And then I'll talk about my course, Teach Me Adhd, and there's going to be time for questions and answers. All right. So, ADHD is so common. In fact, there's about 6.1 million children that have this condition. And ideally, it should be viewed as a chronic condition. Now, to make the diagnosis of ADHD, oftentimes a pediatrician, family physician can make this diagnosis. It doesn't necessarily have to be a psychologist who does this, but we do have to look for certain signs and symptoms that happen and present in a pattern. Okay. But we do know that kids with ADHD oftentimes don't have these symptoms necessarily go away as they get older. In fact, kids then hopefully learn coping strategies. As adults, we can pivot into something that plays to our strengths. But again, there's always going to be some deficits or some struggles in executive functioning, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Sorry. All right. So, for those of you who are not sure about ADHD, I know that sometimes folks come to see me and they say, "Oh, I have ADD, but not ADHD." And I just want to make sure that we all understand that actually that nomenclature or that use of ADD has typically gone away. And now we refer to ADHD as ADHD. And there's actually three different subtypes. So, oftentimes there is that hyperactive impulsive subtype. So, you think about, again, those kids that are always on the go, they're climbing, they're fidgety, they can't sit still. These are hyperactive impulsive type symptoms. It also can be like the kid who can't remember to raise their hand, they just shout out answers, or the child who just kind of darts across the street. And that, of course, as you know, is a safety issue. But that is probably the biggest majority of cases is about 66% where there's some component of that hyperactivity impulsivity. Now, if you're older, it can translate into binge eating, impulse online buying, shopping, and all of those other things as well. Now, the second type of ADHD is inattentive type. Now, these are the kids or individuals that look like they're daydreaming. They could be, given a list of three or four different tasks, but maybe only remember to do the first or last thing and nothing in between. If that sounds like you or your child, it's most likely inattention that's coming into play here. Oftentimes, too, these kids might do their homework, but then they might forget to turn in things, or they might forget what to bring home to get their homework done. So, again, these children often end up getting categorized as having more inattentive symptoms. And then, if you happen to have an individual or a child that has symptoms or behaviors of both hyperactivity and impulsivity and inattention, that's combined type. So you can see here the frequency with which we make these diagnoses, but three times more likely, boys or males are three times more likely to get that diagnosis. It's not that it's not common in females or girls, it's just that the presentation is a little bit different. And if you have been following my weekly Facebook Live show for a while, you know, back in October, I did speak with my friends at Duke about the unique way ADHD presents in girls and females, which is mostly inattentive, could be kind of overlaid with anxiety and perfectionism. And oftentimes, these girls and women get missed and diagnosed later in life because of that. Okay, so I do want to point out that ADHD often doesn't run alone. And in fact, about 66% of kids who have ADHD, often later in life, will have another type of diagnoses, whether it's anxiety, depression, oppositional defiant disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, sleep difficulties, or learning disorders, just to name a few. And it's not typical, or it's more likely, I should say, that sometimes when your child gets a diagnosis of ADHD, you'll have to be monitoring your child's functioning at home and school over time, months, years even, before you can identify additional conditions that are running with ADHD. As you know, and you might have heard me say this before, there's not a blood test or a swab test or an imaging study that 100% guarantees that what we're seeing or dealing with is, in fact, ADHD. That's not how behavioral and mental health disorders work. In fact, as a specialist dealing with behavioral and mental health issues, oftentimes the most important thing is history taking, observations, and data across different informants, so parents and teachers, and the child themselves to really understand what is motivating that behavior. Okay. So it's really important that if you have concerns about your child having ADHD, that you think about what it is, the symptoms that you're having, when it started, how frequently you're seeing it. And you can always put these things, including work samples or like report cards or emails from teachers, together in a folder and talk with your pediatrician about it. Okay. And on my website, I actually have a free download about how to prepare for a behavioral visit so that you can make sure that whoever you're talking to, you're prepared. Because oftentimes, general pediatricians, they do a lot. And those visits typically are 15 to 30 minutes at the most because they see a lot of kids, but they do want to help you decide and learn and identify ADHD as soon as possible. So you'll want to make sure to maximize what you bring to them and then make sure that they then will obviously schedule a follow up time so they can spend more time kind of digging a little bit deeper because we don't ever want to just jump to a diagnosis. I see some of you watching. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to add them as I'm going along. Okay, so we know that ADHD affects family life. I don't know if you're watching this because you have a child who has ADHD, maybe you have ADHD yourself, or multiple people in your household have ADHD. So, the one thing to consider is if this picture here resonates with you, let me know in the comments. I did a lot of research when I was in academia around ADHD for families, and what we know is that we can't just fix it with one thing. You know, we can't just like throw medication at it. Um, although medicine does play an important role, but we have to look at a holistic treatment plan because we know that when used appropriately, medications can help. It can decrease the severity and frequency of symptoms. However, it doesn't necessarily fix the executive function difficulties that still present. And I'll talk about what that means in a little bit. However, I do want to tell you that studies have shown that quality of life for families living with ADHD is often lower than families who have neurotypical kids. And that's just because we know that there is not a magic pill that can fix ADHD challenges, But what we really need is to meet individuals with ADHD where they are and then help explicitly teach them certain skills, coping strategies, because ADHD is much more than a behavioral diagnosis. It does affect executive functioning. So, this study was a qualitative study, meaning that they interviewed lots of different families. And over time, they looked at what those interviews represented and looked for themes. And so, one of the common themes was that the behavior feels like a wrecking ball or coping with a war at home. It's just that, tensions arise. A lot of times, kids or individuals with ADHD have what we call emotion dysregulation, which can cause families or individuals to just kind of respond and react quickly and show those strong emotions. And if you have a parent and a child who have emotion regulation challenges, it can really escalate really quickly. And let's face it, even if you're not parenting a child with ADHD, parenting is just so hard sometimes, right? We often compare ourselves to, other people, or we think, it should be this way. And when you're tired or life just gets in the way, right? You just are like, come on, I've told you this so many times. How come I have to keep telling you, right? And so sometimes it's hard not to take those things personally. But, oftentimes people struggle with family relationships and parent child relationships. Um, so, again, if this is resonating with you, let me know. But I'm here to tell you also that, again, we talk about ADHD, and once families do get that diagnosis from the pediatrician, family physician, or specialist, sometimes your mind immediately goes to, oh my gosh, am I going to have to start medication? And like I said, medicines do play a role and they can work when used appropriately. But this I know is a source of a lot of stress for many, many parents that I see in my own private practice, because as parents, it's really hard to consider thinking about putting your child on medication. However, I will challenge you to think about if your child has asthma and they're having a hard time breathing. Oftentimes, we don't think about like questioning whether or not we should give a child an inhaler to help them breathe, right? Or if a child has a headache or a stomach ache, our natural tendency is to be like, oh, let's look and see. In addition to some of the comfort measures, medication is not as stigmatizing as it is for when we use it for mental health conditions. But that's just what it is. It is a brain based condition. And so I'm here as part of my brand and my company talking every week about mental health issues, pediatric behavioral issues. I want to help normalize that because it really should be seen as a neurobiological condition. And sometimes we definitely need to help the brain and the brain cells signal better by giving them the essential components, neurotransmitters of serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So, but I do know it is a source of stress for parents, and this is some of the things that we need to talk through when a diagnosis is first made. And I do know that there have been other studies that even though parents, if they finally make that decision with their child and the physician that it's time to start medication, I know too that parents constantly struggle with this. It doesn't get any easier, unfortunately. You're going to constantly think, oh my goodness, should I stop medication or should I um, have maybe did we start it too soon? Is it time to stop it? So these are constant questions, but I'm here to tell you that when you work closely with your pediatrician and or family physician or specialist on this, you should be able to ask those questions periodically. We need to reevaluate the care plan every year at least at a minimum to see what else we need to be doing. Is it time to pull away on certain things and add in other supports? Okay. So I briefly want to tell you a little bit more about why I'm so passionate about this and why I am doing the work that I'm doing. So for a long time, I worked at Indiana University School of Medicine at Riley Hospital for Children. And by way of, I was there for a long time helping train future pediatricians on how to incorporate positive parenting during well child visits. And you'd think that pediatricians in general are taught these skills in a very systematic way. But I'm here to tell you that when I first started way back in 2000, in my training, it wasn't taught in a systematic way. In medicine, there's this saying of see one, do one, teach one. And that's kind of how we learned, through a kind of apprenticeship in working with your attendings or staff and hearing how they counsel families and then applying that to your own encounters with families and getting critical feedback, which is a way that we do medicine, right? But unless you had a child or have personal experience, sometimes many of us in our training, until we've actually had kids, felt like, gosh, we don't really know how to actually talk to parents about common behavior issues. And that's when I had the fortune in Indiana University to start bringing this skill set to teaching pediatricians. Prior to my moving to Indiana, I was in Seattle, and my mentor, Carolyn Webster Stratton, shout out to her. I happened to have been running a foster care clinic, and I didn't have kids at the time. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how to support these parents. I mean, I can prescribe medication, but that is not the go to. And so I sought out her expertise and her help. And at that time, I learned her group parenting program and how to teach parents how to play, how to praise, how to do timeout. And the whole time I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Why aren't pediatricians taught this skill set? So, with her permission, once I landed my faculty position at Riley in Indiana, I worked with her to bring positive parenting coaching to future pediatricians. Now, that was a long winded story to share that with you. However, while I was at Riley, one of my good colleagues, Dr. Shapaniak, shout out to her, came to me and said, you know what? I see so many kids with ADHD, as you know, it's very common. But I feel like we need to do a little bit more. The visits are 15, 20 minutes. It's really hard to get in the education that families need. Can you fix this? So, having gone through Dr. Carolyn Webster Stratton's group parenting program, I thought, you know what? I can fix this. So, together with another friend of mine, Dr. Paula Sullivan, shout out to her, we designed with Dr. Shapaniak a group program, which you see here. It's called Tailoring Education for ADHD and Children's Health, or the TEACH program. This was run like with parents in one room, kids in another, and it was group education, group visits for 90-minute visits instead of the 20, 30 minutes individually. And it was over 6 weeks or 6 visits, and each was monthly. And it was so much fun. I mean, we studied this program, we developed this program, we wrote papers on it, and it was really helpful to the families who went through it. And it was offered in clinic. So that way, it was just a way to help pediatricians feel like they were doing what they needed to do to serve families, but also giving families that education and skill set that they so desperately needed. So here's something that we learned as a result of that. A parent in the Teach program actually said in a paper we published, now we talk about things after group. I explain things he doesn't understand. I mean, because kids knew parents were in the other room learning for 90 minutes, parents would tell me, oh my gosh, he was like asking me, like, what did you learn? And then telling me what he learned. And parents just want to understand and talk to their kids, right? I mean, how many times as a parent have you asked your kid, how was school today? Fine. So for these families to finally be feeling like, oh my gosh, he's excited to talk to me, we have things to talk about, it really was eye-opening, for lots of families, but it helped reinforce the fact that the group visit program works. This is another quote that we got from another parent. I was ready to give up. If it weren't for these groups, I might have given up my daughter. I mean, that was really hard to hear, but it's even harder for that parent to be so vulnerable and share that. But this is the stress that parents have when the challenges and the meltdowns and the blowups and the stress and the strain, right? So, for a parent to experience that normalization and be with other parents and understand that they are not alone, this is so big. So, imagine if you can stop that overwhelm and have fun with your child. Stop feeling so worried or guilty, and that because you can reset your own emotions, and stop feeling as stressed because you and your child can work with the school. Stop worrying because your child is happy and proud. So many of us as parents want our kids to feel good about themselves. We worry at night, how they're doing, how they're feeling. We want them just to be happy, right? And a lot of kids with ADHD struggle with that. So I'm going to share with you some really quick tips from the field. And again, because I like mnemonics, I came up with helping promote our kids' best selves. It stands for four different things, and I'm going to go into this in detail. So brain based, emotion vocabulary, C supports, and treatments. Okay. So let me tell you this. So I told you this earlier. If you're just tuning in, please make sure to say hi, to leave a comment. I see there are some questions, so I will be answering them shortly. So, ADHD, as I said, is a brain based condition. Keep this in mind when the going gets tough. So, oftentimes when we are kind of in that thick of it and like we're ready to just kind of get really upset at our kids or get frustrated with them because they should be doing things that we ask them quickly, they shouldn't forget things, or they just should just be doing what we say, you know? Sometimes as a parent, and I have two kids of my own, when they were younger, it was really tough, right? And it's hard to kind of keep your emotions in check. But I remind parents of kids with ADHD is that these kids, we know, in fact, that their brains are actually they have lagging skills with emotion regulation, with focus, with control, and all these other things, and what this boils down to is that they actually are functioning 3 to 5 years behind same age peers. Now, when I tell parents this in clinic, they're like, what? Yeah, I mean, it's true. And so, even though it's not going to necessarily save you from always catching yourself, just try to keep that in mind because they're not doing this on purpose. And I know sometimes it can feel like they are, but they're not. And so this is not an excuse, but it's just a way to help parents understand and maybe approach situations and parenting difficulties a little bit differently. So just remember that ADHD, anxiety, all the mental health disorders, there is a brain based reason for this. So, like I said, it's more than just a behavior issue. We know that kids have executive functioning skills. Now, what's executive function? Well, it is a set of cognitive skills that's designed to help us navigate life. So, for instance, when you tell someone with ADHD, I want you to go to the kitchen and make yourself some lunch and then clean up after yourself. Think about that. How many steps is that? That's a lot, really. So, you got to get up, stop what you're doing, go to the kitchen, know where the plates are, know what you need, get all the components out, get everything together, then put everything away. Don't leave the milk on the counter, right? Eat and then clean up after yourself. I mean, that's so many steps. But the planning, the breaking down and the chunking of these complicated tasks is difficult for individuals with ADHD. So that's why we try to start as early as possible to help educate kids and parents together about what it means to have a brain that thinks and learns differently so that we can set up systems in place so that they can learn. They can learn these things. It's just that they have to be taught in a slightly different manner and reinforced in a different way. Okay. There are sometimes some kids that just get it, and others that just struggle with those common everyday things. So, oftentimes I tell parents to be a coach, right? You'll want to think of yourself as an emotion coach or just a coach, like telling them what exactly they need to do. Now, it's important for kids with ADHD that you don't give too many things all at once because, again, they're going to remember the first thing or the last thing and nothing in between. You'll want to break it down and you want to be as positive as you can. So, if you think about a coach, like let's say for a basketball game, they're not yelling at the kids like, "Why did you do that? Keep your hands over here." They are actually very upbeat and positive, right? They're telling their players what exactly they need them to do. Keep your feet behind this line. Throw your arms like this with both hands. Run over here, be on this side of the court, right? So they are very intentional with what they need to tell the child or player what to do. So, as a parent to a child with ADHD, That's what you've got to adopt. Be that coach and instead meet them where they are, knowing that they're functioning 3 to 5 years behind their regular age peers, that you then meet them where they are and tell them exactly what it is you want them to do, being very upbeat, think about it, and keep your instructions simple, straightforward, and then reinforce every step. I know, gosh, it seems like a lot, but this investment and rethinking and retraining of how you interact with your child is going to pay off in spades when you do this. It might seem like, oh my gosh, well, that's because maybe you yourself don't have these attention and learning difficulties. So we take for granted what we mean and how simple it can be. But when we think about the fact that, again, our kids are struggling with executive functions, we need to break it down in this way. Now, the next one is emotion vocabulary. This kind of goes hand in hand with the coach theory, but what I like to tell parents all the time is that we need to recognize that emotions that originate from the amygdala, and we talk about this right here. The amygdala is a little part in our brain that is our emotion regulation center. And as I said, emotion regulation is an executive function that is often a lagging skill in individuals with ADHD. So, one of the things that you can do, parents, is to recognize that we need to give our kids the emotion vocabulary so that they can actually use their words rather than show us with their bodies or screaming or yelling or throwing things, right? So, we also want to make sure we recognize all of them. So not just focusing on the negative emotions, but the positive ones too. And again, if we can start doing this as early as possible, it just becomes normal that we talk about our emotions. Now, I say this with the full knowledge that when I've counseled families in the past in my clinic, sometimes when depression, anxiety, those types of conditions run in families, it can be hard for some families to do this. So it is not a step that I skip over. And actually, I try to model this for parents in the clinic, right? So we want to just try to be intentional and show kids, I see you. I hear you, and label emotions as much as possible because they are sponges and they are listening. And so kids as young as 18 months, 2, 3, 4 can use big words like frustrated, overwhelmed, disappointed when you use it because they're listening and they can repeat back. But when you do it in real time as a coach, it helps them kind of connect the dots and use those words appropriately. So use and comment on emotions. Now, the next one is see and supports. So we know that individuals with ADHD, they need visual supports. Okay. You can't just tell them something, it's in one ear and out the other. And maybe their attention is somewhere else. And then by the time they recognize something was said, they're like, wait, what? Right? So it's really important to use a multisensory approach when dealing with individuals with ADHD. Okay. So let me just say that in my class, we talk a lot about how we need to make things as visual as possible and really invoke that. Because, again, like I said, ADHD, or maybe I haven't said this yet, but ADHD is more than just not being able to pay attention. We know these kids can actually hyper focus on things that they love for hours. So, video games, reading, arts and crafts, whatever it is that, floats their boat, right? So to speak, and they love, they can do it for a very long time. But we know that individuals with ADHD, it's a problem of attention regulation. So it's not necessarily an absence of attention, but it's actually being able to shift attention from a desired activity to a non desired activity. Okay, and or getting the kind of energy to start paying attention to a complicated or boring task. And it can end up as procrastination or putting things off to the last minute because it's just not interesting or boring or hard. So, again, just remember that ADHD actually is a problem of attention regulation. So that's why we need that multisensory approach. Like again, if a child is hyper focusing and you're saying something, they are not registering. They are like zoned in the zone, and like, that they are just seeing tunnel vision on what they're focused on. So it's really important. I love things like visual timers that's on the screen because you can use this to break up hyperfocus. So, like, let's say a kiddo is sitting down to do video games. You can set a timer for, whatever amount of time. You say, okay, you have 30 minutes, like this. And then when the timer goes off, you need to stop, come down, see me, check in. So again, that way it sort of breaks it up for them. Now, if your child has a hard time getting started on things, you can use this in another way. You can actually instead set it for 5 minutes and start that complicated task or hard task and say, gosh, I know you don't like math, but let's see how many problems we can do together in 5 minutes. And then we're going to have a brain break. Okay. And so anybody can do something for a short period of time, especially if you pair it with an external reward, like, going out to the park or getting to go outside, getting some snuggles with you, whatever. And it's okay to do that. but but then as they get into it, you can increase the time that way, especially when you're trying to chunk like complicated or difficult things, right? So this is very useful, and I use this a lot. But you also want to make sure when you're giving your child a command, you want to get their attention, right? So you want to gently place your arm on their shoulder. You might want to make eye contact and say, and use their first name, like Johnny. Hey, hey, so I'm going to ask you to set the table right now, right? So you want to first make sure you get their attention and get that acknowledgement using visual, voice, and tactile, and then give them your command. Because if you just say it from across the room and then they don't hear you because they're hyper focusing, what's going to happen? You're going to get upset first and frustrated. So we want to make sure that anything that you ask them to do, you do it and maximize the chances that they're listening and will actually adhere. Because kids at the heart want to do their best. And again, we need to make sure that we address those challenges that we know individuals with ADHD have and go into it knowing that. So that way the interaction comes out to be much more positive. Okay. All right. And then the last thing is treatment with a team. So that's actually two T's. You can't do it alone. And so it's really important to figure out who is on your team. And so obviously, I want you to think about you and your child at the center of the team with your child's pediatrician, family physician, or any other specialist, but also your child's teacher, their daycare provider, their tutor, their bus driver, the principal, the counselor, their therapist, anybody who's involved in helping optimize your child's behavior and thinking and learning are on your team. And it's really important that you are coordinating care so everybody's on the same page. Okay, you can't do it by yourself. So imagine if you and your child could share how you were feeling without yelling or tears. If you and your child had common language to understand each other and have tools to tackle each challenge as a team. You and your child had more good days, right? Well, I'm here to tell you you're not alone. Parenting a child with ADHD can feel so lonely, especially on those bad days. Feeling uncertainty doesn't feel good, and gaining knowledge along with a roadmap of actionable steps can help, right? So take action to learn more. You can't do this by yourself. You need to do it with your child. And I am a firm believer that we need to onboard parents and kids together because, in the end of the day, I'm going to be doing a disservice if I just do education to parents. I need to educate that child. Children as young as 2, 3, as long as it's adapted to child friendly terms, we can at least explain to them what's happening to get their buy in. Because otherwise, they're just kind of doing and not feeling like they have any control. And we want to try to help empower them to learn as they're growing so that way they can learn to advocate for themselves and work with you. So, Teach Me ADHD, it's convenient, fun, 8 weeks on Zoom and interactive. I've gone into this thinking, and I actually started this back in October of 2020 during the pandemic when I couldn't do parent training sessions in person anymore. And I had to actually go to telehealth for a lot of my private practice clients. And then I thought, gosh, I'm seeing so many kids with issues with remote learning. Parents are stressed out. They're having to be parent and teacher and really seeing that these kids are struggling. And I thought, you know what? I could actually do something about this because I've done group education work. I've taught pediatricians and I see my own clients. So I actually sat there, and before I could kind of back out, I that's my impulsivity here, is that I kind of thought in my head, I can mash up and design a class for kids and parents to take together from home because we have to be safe, but it needed to be fun because it's on Zoom. And I'm hearing a lot of families not liking Zoom anymore, or they're just like, my kid's not paying attention in class. How can you expect them to do a Zoom class, right? And it also had to be interactive. So that's when I decided to make it a detective theme as well as engaging. And you'll learn more about that. So when you enter the Teach Me ADHD Detective Agency, I have a mission map for families that I've designed over the 8 weeks. You get this in your supply box. Kids love maps. I used to love maps as a child. And so I've designed lots of different missions and deeds for you to do with your child. This is pictures of me at headquarters and some of the different things that I'm doing. My setup from the virtual headquarters here. And I do want to just let you know that, I did some work in my time at Indiana University where I really wanted families to understand that kids are kids first and have ADHD second. So, unfortunately, this video is not going to work right now in terms of sound. I'm not sure, but I will try it. Let's see. For those of you watching, can you hear it? Yeah, so that was just a fun project that I did again while I was at Indiana University. Shout out to Thomas Lewis, the director who helped me produce that with some family volunteers. I will say that the one thing missing are females, and we fully intended to have girls in that video. However, the day that we finally put this together, none of the girls could make it. So maybe it's time for us to do another one of these with some girls in it. But yeah, so this is such an important message, and this is one of the things that I start talking to kids about early on in the class. Oops. So, why teach me ADHD? We want to onboard together. We want to educate, engage, and empower. This was a testimonial that was shared by Detective LP51, who came on last night on my 50th episode. It was nice to see her again. She actually took this class with two of her kids, and her mom came as the second adult. And so, Detective here, LP5, actually was on the younger side. He was 7.5 when he took the class because, my recommended ages are 8 to 12. It's just recommendations, so it's kind of child dependent. But thanks Detective LP51 or AP51 for this wonderful testimonial. But she really enjoyed it, the super secret missions, and even for her wiggly dude, it was designed in a way that kept him engaged. These are some of the folks that came through my program, and I'm just so excited because this is the fifth time I'm offering this class. And so I have had 46 families to date that have gone through, and it's been a treasure each and every time. It's so fun to see these families kind of grow and learn and really gel. And by the end of 8 weeks, being in such a different spot and feeling much more empowered. This is from another family who recommended the course. They actually were part of the first iteration, and again, just really helps with bonding with your child and building that relationship, but also teaching a lot about ADHD and the tools for everyday life. This is another endorsement from Notorious Nana and RP13. And again, I just had such a wonderful time. Each and every one of the families have come through, really do become part of family. And as part of this, are part of an ongoing community. So I do want to mention that when you do enroll in my class, in the course, it's 8 weeks, but I know life gets in the way sometimes. So sometimes you might get sick, you might forget, you might just be really busy that day. Well, the good news is every time I offer the class, I offer usually 2 or 3 different class times. And so if you can't make your scheduled class time, if you know ahead of time that you're going to miss, you can always jump in on one of the other classes for that week. So you kind of get that live experience. But if it doesn't work out for your schedule, you always have access to the video supplement. What is that? It's pre-recorded content without other people there. It's just me, but I've also done some stuff to the video to make it more interactive and engaging so that you can watch at any time to sort of make up that. Or if, let's say, 2 parents want to be in the class, but dad's working late or mom has to go in, one of the parents, the requirement is just one parent and one child sitting there together. But at any time, any of the parents can watch the video supplement. So that way, again, everybody's on the same page because that's really important consistency. And then we have an exclusive Facebook group for families to share wins and challenges and post pictures of evidence of completed family missions and get feedback from headquarters as well as getting cheered on by your fellow detectives. Waitlist priority. So usually I open waitlist priority advanced registration 3 days before it opens to the public. But because of where it fell this year, I actually had it open for a whole week. So now we're in the general registration period, which ends on Sunday. But there is, when you sign up for my waitlist, let's say you can't figure out how to get this January schedule to work out, but you want to do the interactive piece, then you can sign up to be on my wait list. And every time advanced registration opens up, you get up to 15% off of the package. And then other resources, just so you know, I have so many different things that I do and doesn't cost anything. So as you know, I love to read and I host a free parenting book club on Facebook. I've actually announced, I think 5 of the 6 books scheduled for 2022. Which is tomorrow, on my website. So you can look and see if there's any titles that are of interest to you. And then in addition, I have been inviting the authors to join me for a Facebook Live. So if you read along, and then what a treat to be able to ask questions of the author at the end. And even if you can't join, or if you didn't read the book but want to meet the author, you can always hop in the parenting discussion group on my blog Facebook page and join. I have all of them archived up to a year, and then they go away. But again, it's always there for you to be able to do that. Some of the ones that some of the past authors include on this slide is Elaine Taylor Klaus of Impact Parents. She's written several books and she does have a coaching program. Dr. Sharon Celine, and also just recently, Dr. Edward Hollowell. And then, as you know, I have my weekly Facebook Live show. It's currently every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. However, starting in the new year, I'm moving it to Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's actually going to be inside the parenting discussion group. just had to simplify things for me instead of having 3 different places of doing lives, and also during the daytime because all my weekends and the evenings are when I do my Teach Me ADHD course. So I have a family too and needed to kind of free up some of that evening time for my family. But again, all of those episodes are on my YouTube channel. You can always chime in if and listen and learn. And then coming soon, I just want to share I am working on something for just parents. So it's going to be called Teach to Go. And what this is going to have a bunch of MP3 files so that you can kind of download it to your device, play it in your car, play it while you're doing laundry or dishes, and learn all about ADHD. And through that course, you'll have a Facebook group to ask questions. And then kind of it's a nice supplement to the Teach Me ADHD course. So that's coming soon. So again, if you're here still watching, I so appreciate you. This was just a kind of random video pop-up. So I'm glad that you took the time to sort of stay with me. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram as Let's Talk Kids Health. Follow me on social media. If you have any questions about anything that I just shared, please let me know. Send me a question, DM, email, whatever, or share this video with someone who you think could benefit. I am, as I said, enrolling now. And this course is going to start the week of January 9th. And I do offer the class 3 times a year: January, March, April, and September. And this course pricing right now, it's going to go up just slightly, a little bit more come March. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. So if you register before New Year's Eve ends, you can get 10% off by using the top secret code of 10 off Jan 2022. Sorry, not 2022, but 10 off Jan 22. Thank you for that feedback. Great discussion. Tawana, yes, I can relate to that picture when I showed that earlier. So thank you for tuning in. If there's any other comments or topics related to ADHD parenting, I am always happy to jump on and give a webinar like this. I have to do more of them. And so I appreciate you so much and hope you found that helpful. Enjoy the holiday, and I'll see you in the new year and hopefully inside the agency.